What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones, and we always thank the good folks at Delmarva Channel 14.1 for inviting us into your homes on this Saturday morning from 9 to 9:30 Eastern Time. All right, don't forget, as always, hashtag BYP, social media at RichQ on Q, Twitter, IG, and the YouTube channel. All right, so here we go. We got to put a bow on Super Bowl 57, a game in which was won by Kansas City 38-35 over the Philadelphia Eagles. And this game kind of had everything, right? It had drama, it had controversy, it had some ridiculous, goofy plays, it had some blunders, it had some crazy plays as well. And then ultimately, the difference in this game, and we'll get into was it a penalty or was it not a holding penalty late in the game that was called on Philadelphia, which enabled the Kansas City Chiefs to get a fresh set of downs and ultimately kick the game-winning field goal for the final margin of 3. Hit the over. We told you that. We also did very well with some player props, 4-1 when it came to player props. We had 4 or 5. So we'll get into that second half of the show. But a couple of things you got to remember. Going into this game, I thought the difference would have been the defensive line play from the Philadelphia Eagles. And I thought maybe that was going to be that one X factor. Here's a front that posted and accumulated 70-something odd sacks throughout the course of the regular season. Postseason, played exceptionally well, shut down the Giants on that offense, knocked out the quarterback of the 49ers and Purdy. They had to rely on a veteran journeyman in Johnson. They couldn't get it done. Now you go to a different animal in Patrick Mahomes. And the thought going into that game was, he's compromised. He's got some issues with the ankle. He's not going to be able to run around. We saw how bad the field was. That's another story for another day, right? Sodgate, for some of the goofballs out there. Both teams had to play on the field in those conditions. But Mahomes' mobility certainly was limited. And we thought the Philadelphia Eagles and that defense was going to get some pressure on Mahomes and knock him on his fanny like Tampa Bay did a couple of years ago in the Super Bowl. It didn't happen. Patrick Mahomes was pressured in his first 2 Super Bowls 49 times. He was pressured 29 times in the Super Bowl loss against Tom Brady in Tampa Bay. Last Sunday against the Philadelphia Eagles in Arizona, he was pressured 11 times. Here's a game that the Philadelphia Eagles led by 10, 24-14 going into the locker room. When it comes to Super Bowls, when you have that type of lead, the only other team to blow that lead was the New England Patriots. If you recall, I'm sorry, the Atlanta Falcons against the New England Patriots when they had that huge lead by 25, 28, 23, and ultimately lost that Super Bowl. It's a rarity where you blow that lead. Mahomes gets tackled, starts limping off the field. You go into the locker room, extended halftime. Greg Olsen brought up a great point during the telecast. Instead of 15, it's 29 minutes. Here you go, Rihanna, do your thing on the stage, have fun. Okay, fine. Andy Reid had plenty of time to make adjustments. Patrick Mahomes had plenty of time to retape, to take a shot, whatever you needed to do, and get up for that second half, which, by the way, they promptly came out, touchdown, field goal. I mean, you want to talk about making adjustments. The things that drove Eagles fans crazy when it came to Andy Reid back in the day was the lack of balance from offense to passing, and the clock management and the time management. He was brilliant in the second half. He danced circles around John Gannon and Sirianni and company. And you get outscored 24-11, hence you get the 38-35 victory. Listen, there were a couple of drives I want to highlight. Let's get into the big play everyone's talking about, the hold on Juju, Bradbury. I thought it was the correct call. I really did. By rule, by definition, you tug, you spin them around, you're going to throw the flag. NFL Films did a great job with a photograph still shot. Bradbury came out afterwards, to his credit, said, listen, it was definitely a hold. But even besides that, prior to that, right? Think about this drive chart. Kansas City had a 1st and 10, okay? Pacheco picks up 7. He was a monster in that game. Then on a second down, he gets his bell rung by Johnson. Now it's all of a sudden it's a 3rd and 7, pardon me. Kelsey for 7. 3rd and 1, Pacheco back in the game for 10. 1st and 10, this was the play of the game. The seas open up. The seas part. Moses parts the seas. Here you go, Mahomes, 26 yards. And you just almost knew the inevitable. You had the big special teams blunder, right? Kadarius Toney had to return. a long return, longest Super Bowl history, 65 yards. And then you had the two plays where, again, if you're playing zone, there aren't scores. You go man to man, those are scores. The same play, different set of circumstances. Moore, oh, by the way, plus 950 to score. And then Tony. Both those wideouts had one catch respectively. Both went for touchdowns. If you're John Gannon, defensive coordinator, you can't allow that to happen under any circumstances. Now, you want to sit there and tell me we were robbed of seeing Jalen Hurts get the ball back late in that game? Fine. Are you going to tell me you can't throw a flag in that situation because it's the Super Bowl and it's the fourth quarter and it's crunch time and there's, a couple minutes left in the game? I'll agree with you to that too, but nowhere is it written. There's no sanctity of the game where you can't throw a flag in that situation. And I'll say this, all the Eagles fans that have been crying and whining and complaining all week long that they got screwed. It was a bad call. It's not fair. The NFL scripted, it's rigged. Stop. You're embarrassing yourself. If that call is on Kansas City, and the Philadelphia Eagles got a fresh set of downs, and they ultimately go down, wind down the clock, kill the clock, and kick a game-winning field goal. And the Chiefs fans are acting like the Eagles fans. What are the Eagles going to say? Wow, that's called. Deal with it. It's the NFL, man. We saw that defense get exposed, and maybe there's something to be said about the level of opposition they played. And I'm not going to hedge. I'm not going to turnstile. But ultimately, when you look at the teams they played this year, and you can't apologize for who's on your schedule, they were not tested. They weren't. Let's be honest. Maybe it's the watered down NFC. Maybe it's the watered down NFC East. Maybe it was the scheduling. They did what they had to do. They blew out teams. They handled their business. That's what the great teams do. They won 14 games. They got to the quarterback. There's something to be said. That's not by accident. They're a very good football team. They were not tested against the Giants, and they certainly were not tested against San Francisco. It's a different animal in Kansas City. And I thought the drive that cemented Patrick Mahomes' legacy was coming out of the locker room, and they went right down the field. And this is all after Jalen Hurts had to fumble, right? 3rd and 1, penalty on Sayamalo, back him up 5, 3rd and 6. You're in a shotgun. You have the bad snap, you fumble, you lose it. It's returned the other way for 6. Eagles still came back the very next drive and scored. So it shows the resiliency, and it shows just how good of a great quarterback Jalen Hurts is. But I thought that drive cemented Patrick Mahomes' legacy. See, you win one Super Bowl, that's wonderful. You win 2 and you're multiple MVPs. That's where you start to go in that rarefied air, because typically any quarterback that's won multiple Super Bowls is in the Hall of Fame. Still waiting to see what's going to happen with Eli. Should be a Hall of Famer. Jimmy Plunkett won 2 Super Bowls, not in the Hall of Fame. Mahomes is already in the Hall of Fame. You want to start to sit there about the Mount Rushmore legacy. I still think back it up a little bit. He's had a cup of coffee in the NFL, but he's an exceptional, brilliant quarterback. And the fact that he played on a bum wheel and he played as efficiently as he did, the numbers weren't gaudy, but he needed to make the plays when he had to. Something to be said about that. And conversely, on the flip side, Jalen Hurts, what more can you want from a young quarterback, right? Talk about really just, his second full-time season as a starter after they got waxed last year to Tampa in the playoffs. This kid played remarkable. He's going to get the bag. His numbers were gaudy. He made all the right throws. His legs were the difference as well to kind of keep the Eagles in the game. The defense failed him. The defense did not make the plays when they needed to make the plays. And I also thought the one drive Philly came away with 3 and not 7 kind of spelled the end. The flag aside and all the other nonsense. It was a hell of a season for the Philadelphia Eagles. Right now you look at the odds, they're still right there to go back next year. And then you look at the MVP race as it stands. Allen is plus 700. Mahomes is plus 700. Burrow's plus 700. Herbert's plus 900. Tua and Hurts are plus 1,200. Lamar Jackson, oh, by the way, earlier in the week, plus 1,600, now down to plus 1,300. I'm wondering if people know something we don't when it comes to the future, or where Lamar Jackson might be. And then if you want to look at some ridiculous value, only because I'm bringing this up, they might need a quarterback. Tennessee, plus 7,000, 27th best odds to win in the NFL. Why do I bring it up? Because you still have Carr out there, Aaron Rodgers. We don't know where they're going to land. We'll get into that in a moment or two. But I thought it was an entertaining game. Did I like the fact that a flag was thrown late? No. Listen, I'm putting my Giant fandom aside and being objective as possible. That was a game where the Philadelphia Eagles had. They had that game. They're going to kick themselves. They're going to go back and they're going to watch this game. And they're going to think about a couple of the plays. You know, again, the fumble return for a touchdown, settling for a field goal instead of 7, giving up the big punt return to Kadarius Toney, getting beat on the same exact play on different odds and sides. So there's a lot of things that you walk away and you're fuming if you're a Birds fan, but then you think about it, the NFC is somewhat wide open. It's a young man's game when it comes to the quarterback position. I think we can agree it is the changing of the guard, but for Andy Reid, for Patrick Mahomes, the legacy is cemented. We can't argue that anymore. The legacy is cemented for those two respectively. And I thought it would have been a very interesting conversation. If they lose that game, then you start to get in this, all right, you won one, but now you're kind of like the Atlanta Braves of the 90s, right? You had that great pitching staff and you only won one World Series. You couldn't get it done. So we'll talk a little bit about the quarterbacks going forward. Eagles have about 15 to 20 free agents set to hit the market. I don't think some of these guys are going to come back, so we'll get into that a little more. I want to touch on the NBA as well, as we are just cranking up on a Saturday morning edition of BYP with Q. Rich Quinones here. Appreciate everyone keeping us locked into Delmarva TV 14.1. I love the fact that you guys have invited me into your homes, and certainly grateful for that. On Twitter, at RichQonQ, hashtag BYP. When we come back on the other side, we'll get into the futures market in the NFL, as I alluded to. I want to get into some of these quarterbacks and where do we put Jalen Hurts now after that performance Sunday in Super Bowl 57? So we'll dive into that and a lot more on the other side, midway through a Saturday edition of Back Your Play. We'll come back right after this. All right, everyone, welcome back to a Saturday edition of BYP. Rich Quinones here. And as always, appreciate you guys keeping us locked in. So that's right. We filled up during the break. We're good to go. We filled up. We talked a little bit about Jalen Hurts and the game that he had. And I mentioned before the timeout, before we hit the break midway through a Saturday edition of BYP, young quarterbacks, right? Allen, Mahomes still, Hurts, Burrow, Herbert, Trevor Lawrence. I'm not ready to put Daniel Jones in that conversation. You know, Lamar Jackson. The NFL right now, when it comes to the quarterback play, it's without a doubt a young man's game, which leads me into the Aaron Rodgers, the Derek Carr, the Jameis Winstons, the Baker Mayfields, Bradford, the Sam Darnold, you know, veteran guys, lower tier quarterbacks, where are they going to go? I think some of those guys will find a home as a backup, whether it's going to be Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield. Winston can still play in this league. Now, you're going to get the good and bad with Jameis Winston. He's going to throw for yards. He's going to throw touchdowns, but he's also going to have some picks and some bad interceptions and fumbles. Rodgers and Carr are going to be the sought-after quarterbacks. Now, the Raiders finally granted Derek Carr his release. So now he's a free agent. He was going to just basically veto and block every potential trade. So there's a couple teams I want to throw out there, and I want you guys to tell me what you think. You got the Jets. You got Washington. We got the Jets. We have Washington. You've got San Francisco, maybe Green Bay. And then you have, I'll throw the Titans. So the best landing spot, I think, for Derek Carr, I think the Jets should make a push for Carr over Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to tell you why. He's a younger quarterback. He doesn't come with the pedigree or the overall legacy talent of Aaron Rodgers. But he's a good bridge quarterback, if that's what they're looking for. And he's a good team player. Derek Carr is not going to throw anyone under the bus. And the reason I say that is there are quarterbacks out there at this stage of the game where you can't trust them from that standpoint. You can't trust them from that regard. I can't. When I look at a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. I think what's happening now is he does the weekly spot, which you get paid a lot of money to go on McAfee, Pat McAfee's show, where there's entertainment value in that, where he might say something he's talking about going into the dark in his retreat in a couple of days, and he'll come back. He'll have more clarity on where he's going to go in life and his career. Hey, man, that's your right as a human being. If you need to do that, go do it. Have fun. I hope you cleanse yourself and you come back with clarity. But then when you've got NFL insiders like an Ian Rappaport or an Adam Schefter who are reporting about when this might take place, when this journey might take place, like, who cares if they're speculating when you might do it? They're not delivering it as fact, but yet Aaron Rodgers now is starting to get annoyed. Aaron Rodgers now is starting to get ticked off. Aaron Rodgers now is starting to bark back at NFL insiders, bark back at the media. Here's the problem with that, folks. When you open yourself up, when you share your personal life with the whole world, and you want everyone to know your stance on politics, social issues, COVID vaccination, COVID-19, conspiracy theories, UFOs, assassination, going out in the wilderness to find yourself, then you're open to criticism. We're allowed to opine on that. And we don't owe you an apology for that. So the fact that he starts barking like that, that tells me you stick him in the New York media in that 1 week, one of those Post reporters or daily news reporters hammer him because he threw for $178 and he had 2 picks. How's he going to react? Even prior to that, let's just say he's with the Jets going into the offseason now, leading up to training camp. You don't think they're going to start to pick and pry and prod? And Aaron Rodgers, you're starting to see this very defiant person, right? And he's also lost a little bit on his fastball. I mean, come on. You couldn't beat the Detroit Lions at home to clinch a playoff spot and threw for under 200 yards and 2 picks. You know how many NFC championships this guy's been to? You know how many NFC championships he's lost? He's an all-time great, but he's not a clutch quarterback. And his legacy has taken a hit. He's won 1 Super Bowl. And the following year, they were 15-1 and lost to the Giants in the divisional round. They got waxed. So I'm starting to think 39 years of age, lost a little bit on the softball, on the fastball, I should say. Has a tendency to throw some of his young wide receivers under the bus. How's that going to play in New York? This is also a Jet squad that loved the backup so much they were walking around with Mike White shirts and not Zach Wilson. So think about that for a moment. The other thing is they've gone down this rabbit hole before. The Jets have. 2008, the New York Jets traded for another all-time great Green Bay Packers quarterback in Brett Favre. And he started to sling a little bit in the preseason. They started off 3-3, had the big 5 touchdown performance against the Cardinals, reeled off 5 in a row. They got to 8-3. Then all of a sudden, they beat the Titans to get to 8-3. They lost to Detroit. I'm sorry, they lost to Denver. He started to, feel some pain in the arm, the shoulder, the throwing arm. It turned into a noodle arm. He had injuries, and they finished 500. And then he went after the season and went to Minnesota for 2 years. And we know how that worked out, right? Threw that bad pick in the NFC Championship against the Saints. Point is this. Sometimes the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And I would much rather take a flyer on a guy like Derek Carr. Lamar Jackson, by all accounts, is about $100 million off to where he wants to be with the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson is another quarterback that I think when push comes to shove will find his way out of Baltimore. And here's a quarterback I can see right down 95 with the Washington Commanders, especially if they turn around and hire Eric Bieniemy as an offensive coordinator, because I don't think they tailored the offense properly for Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. So you've got Carr, you've got Rodgers, you got Lamar Jackson. My gut tells me Aaron Rodgers is really going to seriously contemplate retirement. But then I think a lot of people have countered that with some really good points. They've said, Q, hold on a second. Tom Brady's just retired. Aaron Rodgers is now, still the face, you want to argue, of the NFL when it comes to the quarterback play. No knock on Patrick Mahomes. I get it, because I would take Mahomes right now over Rodgers. But their point was, this guy's got an ego. He's so vain. There's no way he retires and then he's got to share the spotlight with Tom Brady in 5 years when they're doing their speeches and their bust is enshrined in Canton. So that's a very good point. But I'm wondering how many teams are starting to get a little turned off? How many teams are starting to get a little tired with the nonsense that is Aaron Rodgers? What's the risk to reward? Is it low risk, high reward, or big risk, low reward? And Brett Favre was 39 when the Jets traded for him. Aaron Rodgers is 39. So that's what makes the NFL offseason so interesting when you really kind of dissect it, because as soon as the Super Bowl is over, then you start to get the free agents. Then you say, all right, what are we going to do? Are we going to tag this guy? Are we going to tender him? Are we going to offer him a long-term contract? Eagles are going to have to figure out what they're going to do with Jalen Hurts. I don't think Fletcher Cox comes back. I don't think Miles Sanders comes back. I don't think James Bradbury comes back. He's going to want to get paid. The Giants have to decide, what are they going to do with Daniel Jones? Are they going to give him that 35, 40 million a year? What are they going to do with Saquon Barkley? They just voided the contract of veteran Sterling Shepard. They're going to get Kenny Golladay off the books. Washington's got to answer questions. Dallas has to answer questions. So it's not like it's just one team. 32 teams in the NFL. Now, this day right now, on this Saturday in mid-February, they're all starting fresh. They're all starting from scratch, right? They're all starting fresh. The odds tell you Kansas City, San Francisco, Buffalo, Cincinnati, the Eagles, right around that plus 500 to 750 favorites. Then you take a look at some of these other teams, maybe Miami plus 2,500, maybe Detroit, right? Detroit was a team that everyone said, you don't want Detroit to get into the playoffs. They're sitting at plus 2,500, which is a futures bet, meaning if you think the Detroit Lions are going to go to the Super Bowl next year and win it, plus 2,500 odds, hence future bets. When the season starts, if they play really well and say they're 6-1, 7-1, that plus 2,500 now starts to drop a little bit because the books don't want to give it away, right? The odds are not going to go up. It's when they start to lose, then all of a sudden the odds go up. That's why I always tell people, if you're looking at teams to bet on during the NFL season, know your strong teams and try to catch them if there's a losing streak. A couple of years ago, Kansas City was, I believe, 4-5, and their odds to win the AFC West at the time was right around plus 350, plus 400. Not bad. Take a flyer on them. What did they do? They ripped off 7-8 wins in a row, and they won the AFC West. If they were 9-0, their odds to win a division would have been minus 110. So am I really going to sit there and lay $110 to win back 100? No, that's a fool's bet. There's no value in that. So when we talk about that on BYP, we always say you want to shop around a little bit. That's what you want to do. It's the same in the NBA. Same thing. A big time player might be hurt and he's a rim protector. He plays good defense. You might be more inclined to take the underdog and look at the over on the total amount of points that are scored. So there's the over and then there's the under, right? And again, I'm speaking to the audience right now that might be that beginner, that novice out there, not some of the expert guys that go back and forth with me on Twitter, on social media. They already know this. They probably heard it in nauseum. But again, I think it's fair to lay it out for the viewing audience, maybe tuning in for the first time. So there's a lot of trends and stats, and you can kind of dig yourself and pile on all this information. But at the end of the day, you're betting the number, not the team. And that's what people have to remember. So that's why I thought going into the Super Bowl, part of me liked the over in the game. I thought it was going to be a high scoring affair. And I thought there was going to be a team that actually was going to go for two. In that case, the odds were plus 110. So if you bet 100, you win 110 back. That's not bad. You win an extra 10. And that's why I like that player prop and that prop bet. And it turned out that the Eagles hit on it. Same thing in the NBA. Points scored, rebounds. I mean, you just got to do your due diligence. You got to do your work, to be honest. So that's where we're at in the NFL. Offseason now has officially begun. And it's a long time now before the start of the season. April's right around the corner. You've got the NFL draft. You got training camp. There's going to be a buzz. I think what's going to happen is we're going to wait to see the domino effect that is Aaron Rodgers, because let's just say he decides he's going to go back to the Packers. Now you've eliminated San Francisco. I didn't even mention Jimmy G. You've eliminated Tennessee. You've eliminated New York. You've eliminated Washington. You eliminated, I don't know who else. Well, that's really all I can think of at the moment. But you take those teams off the board. Now it's, all right, Rodgers is back. Who are we going to go after? Jimmy G, Carr, Winston. All right, maybe Carr signs with a team. Maybe he signs with Tennessee. Maybe he signs with Washington. Now, all of a sudden, take those guys off the board. All right, Lamar Jackson, you're going to have to give up the ranch and pay him. Maybe he stays with Baltimore. Now you got to take him off the board. So that's why one quarterback, one decision by a quarterback can make everything else, that ripple effect, absolutely crazy in the NFL. Honestly, it's this effect, right? The Brady effect, the Rodgers effect. Where are these guys going to go? What decision? Last year, everyone thought because Denver hired Nathaniel Hackett that Rodgers was going to go to Denver. Rodgers didn't, spurns him, stays in Green Bay. Denver turns around. They give up the farm to make a trade for Russell Wilson and pay him $240 million. And look what kind of season they had, right? That's a $240 million mistake. They get rid of Hackett after not even a full year. And now they hire Sean Payton out of the TV booth. So it's that trickle-down effect. One quarterback, the domino effect, it can make or break a franchise and their decision-making. And that's something we'll talk a little bit about next week's edition of BYP. Hey, just a reminder, as always, appreciate TV 14.1 for allowing us to do our thing. You guys are unbelievable. Check them out online. They've got all their sub channels as well. They've been just wonderful and gracious hosts. We enjoy coming into your home every Saturday from 9 to 9:30. Don't forget, follow me on social media at Rich Q on Q on Twitter, on IG, Facebook, Rich Quinones, the YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. You can hashtag BYP. We've got some good shows already in the bank. Some of our insiders, Lloyd Vance, Nick Costco, Ali Milnicki from Nothing But Locks podcast, Javon Alford, Glenn Irby, who does a great job covering the Philadelphia Eagles, some really good guests. We're going to talk a substantial amount of gambling and sports betting next week, and we're going to start to look into some NBA MVP odds, college basketball, March Madness right around the corner. We're going to start to dive in a little bit to baseball, and then during the week, the 27 and Q pod with myself and two-time champ from the New York Football Giants, Mr. Brandon Jacobs, number 27. So we film and record that during the week on the pod as well on the channel, Rich Q on Q. So that's going to do it for a Saturday. As always, we appreciate everyone keeping us locked in to TV 14.1 in Delmarva. Have a wonderful Sports Saturday. And remember, think money management, have a little fun with it. Don't go outside the box. If you don't have it, you don't spend it, you don't gamble. You just kind of keep it in your pocket. But if you do it, remember a couple things. Money management, be smart about it. If you're going to say it, that means you're going to play it. If you're going to play it, you're going to back it. If you back it, you're going to stack it. All right. Thanks for tuning in to a Saturday edition of BYP. As always, I'm Rich Quinones. We'll talk to you next Saturday, right back here on TV Delmarva, 14.1 of the YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q.